Cruelty hardly becomes me. This game of cruelty is easily the most boring part of the week. Why did you say to me I mean something to you? 'Cause everybody sees that this is the thing you do to me. Oh, everybody sees that this is the thing you do to me. Think I'm living it up. In the spotlight, you think I'm living it up. It's a lie. Who's next in your drama? Honestly, private, yes, but I think it's me. So give me a sign, give me a warning. Please don't lie, I'll take your time. Everybody says that this is the thing you do to me. Everybody says that this is the thing you do to me. Just say, just get what you do. Touch me. I'm living
All right, if you're tuning in, ooh. All right, if you're tuning in right now, thank you so much. What you just listened to was Journal of Ardency by Class Actress. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Saturday afternoon, 2:24, March 9th, 2019. Thank you for joining me today on this very nice Saturday in New York. It's a nice day out. And I just thought I'd hop on the mic today to talk about a few things that were occurring during the week. Wanted to get a few thoughts out today. Just a disclaimer for anyone joining in, this will be a political talk. I find it important to start disclosing beforehand because sometimes people join in thinking that there'll be a type of discussion about something else. But then again, there was a disclaimer in the video title. So I think you kind of got yourself into, you knew what you were getting yourself into. So today I wanted to talk very importantly about the whole Ilhan Omar backlash that was going on with the anti-Semitism in the news. Wanted to throw out a few thoughts about that. Kind of talk about these new developments about Chelsea Manning and going back to jail, which is actually very big news, very important news. And of course, it's not being covered by the mainstream media. So I think the more voices that go out there, whether it be on YouTube or podcast or whatever, I think it's very important to talk about. We're also broadcasting this to YouTube and we're recording this for our page as well. So thank you for tuning in. So first thing I wanted to talk about was this Elon Omar controversy that continued to dominate headlines this week with more of backlash from Republicans and Democrats because of, obviously, if you haven't heard, Ilhan Omar came out this week again with some criticisms with the Jewish lobby, Israel lobby, APAC, and its influence on American policy. And I wanted to kind of explain um, this whole situation beforehand before I kind of get into it. And I think there's no better explanation than this article here by Glenn Greenwald on The Intercept. It's called "The House Democrats' Rebuke of Republican Ilhan Omar is a Fraud for Many Reasons, Including Its Wild Distortion of Her Comments." First of all, I think that's interesting that the title of this article is like a paragraph long. I didn't know that people could do that now. The House Democrats rebuke Republican Ilhan Omar is a fraud for many reasons, including its wild distortion of her comments. That's the name of the article. I thought that was pretty interesting. That we're literally making paragraphs for titles for articles now. So I thought that was pretty freaking cool. But Glenn Greenwald could do whatever the hell he wants because he is the best. And actually, one thing that I thought was pretty cool and exciting was a few weeks ago, Glenn Greenwald retweeted me, kind of commenting on that whole NBC News, spreading misinformation about Tulsi Gabbard and really shitting on her with fake information, which was just so outlandish. I had to butt in and say something. And I remember, I think I tweeted at Casey Hunt, who is such a great propagandist. You really have to give it up to her. Terrible journalist. She's not even a journalist. She's a joke of a journalist, but a terrific, unbelievable, tremendous propagandist. She really is. It's tremendous. So I tweeted at her and I said, why should anyone take you seriously when you basically are retweeting falsified information, which was proven, which is so ridiculous. The fact that these journalists are getting away with releasing crap, really. And I call it crap because they're using sources that have been discredited to the point where even Facebook had to shut them down on new knowledge. So the fact that even I could see that, and I had to comment and be like, Casey, why should anyone take you or NBC News seriously when you're peddling this fake news crap? It took the attention of Glenn Greenwald, and he even retweeted me. And I have to say that was the first time that I had a tweet go viral ever. I mean, I've tweeted things before that have gotten attention, but it's never to the scale of what Glenn Greenwald did to me. He retweeted me and put it on his, in his space and to his followers. And that was the first time experiencing my phone. I was at the gym at the time, and my phone was, on the bench, and it's vibrating. It's going off. I'm like, is this what it feels like to go viral? Like it was crazy. It was tremendous. So I'm going to start off this whole Ilhan Omar section of this podcast today with Glenn Greenwald's article from The Intercept. And so he says GOP Congressman Steve King has served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 16 years, yet Democrats, who controlled the House for 4 of those years and now control it again, never formally rebuked or condemned him until last month. And they did so at the same time that Republicans removed him from the committee assignments due to a long history of white supremacist remarks. Of course, referring to the blackface, I believe, in the remarks of Steve King and his past, which was very troubling and kind of strange, if you ask me. It came out that he was, taking pictures in blackface and stuff like that. So that was really strange to see. But of course, they got him off committees. And by extremely stark contrast, Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the first Black Muslim woman ever, again, I am recording this out of my basement, so I apologize for the inevitable calls. Unless someone's calling in right now, that could be one of you guys, of course. But anyway, back to the article. Okay. So, by extremely stark contrast, Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is the first black Muslim woman ever elected to the Congress. She served in the House for a little more than 2 months, and House Democratic leaders have already formally condemned her once and are preparing to do so again, this time even more harshly and officially. On Thursday of this past week. On February 11th, the House Democratic leadership, responding to statements made by Omar about large donors in AIPAC driving pro-Israel policies, issued a joint statement condemning Omar for what they called her use of anti-Semitic tropes, adding, tropes, a word I've never heard in my life before. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know where that word came from, because I sure as hell never said it. Adding that her prejudicial accusations about Israel's defenders are deeply offensive. They then demanded we condemn these remarks and we call upon Congresswoman Omar to immediately apologize for these hurtful comments. Omar then issued a statement of her own in which she unequivocally apologized for unintentionally invoking anti-Semitic tropes, but made crystal clear that the problematic role of lobbyists in our politics, whether it be AIPAC as well as the NRA or the fossil fuel industry, was one she would continue to aggressively address and combat. Congresswoman quickly made good on her promise to continue speaking about AIPAC's toxic influence, the destructive and immoral support given to Israel by the U.S., and the subordination of Americans' constitutional rights and the country's national interests to that foreign nation. Speaking last Wednesday in Washington at a town hall meeting with several other progressive House members, Congresswoman Omar was asked about the use of the anti-Semitism label to shut down debate over Israel. In reply, she said, I want to talk about the political influence. I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for alliance to a foreign country. Again, she said, I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for alliance to a foreign country. That remark right there created a new outburst of anti-Semitism accusations against Omar, initially provoked by New York Magazine's Jonathan Chait, whose column carried the most how do you pronounce this word? Sensationalistic and misleading headline possible. Ilhan Omar accuses Israel hawks of alliance to a foreign country. That, in turn, led numerous AIPAC supporting Democratic House members to again denounce her for anti-Semitism, leading to this exchange with a Democratic House colleague who had accused her of prejudice and bigotry. Nita Lowy, replying to Ilhan Omar on Twitter, saying lawmakers must be able to debate with prejudice or without, prejudice or bigotry. I am saddened that Republican Omar continues to miscategorize support for Israel. I urge her to retract the statement and engage in further dialogue with the Jewish community on why these comments are so hurtful. And Ilhan Omar responding to her, our democracy is built on debate, Congresswoman. I should not be expected to have allegiance or pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country in Congress or serve on the committee. The people on the 5th elected me to serve their interest. I'm sure we can agree on that. So I just want to highlight how disgusting it is that Democrats are coming out against Ilhan Omar on the left and accusing her of anti-Semitism when literally what I just read to you, the only thing she's doing is highlighting how important and seriously wrong it is for any person in what's the word I'm trying to say? Any person serving constituents, any person in Congress would ever be beholden to uh, a lobby in general. She's criticizing the idea of lobbies pretty much. So from there, members of Congress in both parties who have devoted their career to dutifully supporting the APAC agenda began once again ganging up to denounce Omar, accusing her of anti-Semitism and demand apologies and denunciations. Uh, Right-wing charlatans such as Ben Shapiro, who have built lucrative careers pretending to be advocates of free discourse and who reflectively mock complaints of racism and bigotry as overly sensitive snowflake fragility, he fueled the fire this week because this time it was their own group that they perceived was being criticized. That's true. Um, Ben Shapiro was vehemently active on Twitter this week, very offended by Omar's statements, and it's interesting to see such hypocrisy from Ben Shapiro when he is one of the people that are mostly out there, you know, calling attention to oversensitive sensitivity, and he seems to be doing it himself when it comes to this, which is completely crazy because there's nothing anti-Semitic about what Ilhan Omar said. But I'll continue before I give my thoughts on that. But so the culmination of all this was the meek, subservient, and highly predictable amount of Democratic House leaders that they once again intend to formally rebuke Omar, this time in the form of a House resolution. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and top Democrats will take floor action Wednesday in response to controversial remarks by Representative Ilhan Omar about Israel. The second such rebuke of the freshman Democrat from party leaders in recent weeks, Politico reported. So there are so many points to be made about this episode, each of which could justify its own article or podcast. It is, for instance, beyond dispute that what Omar is saying is true, given that the very first Senate this year was one that allowed punishment for American citizens who boycott Israel, while U.S. citizens in 26 states are formally punished for boycotting this foreign nation, as we reported last month in the case of a Texas elementary speech pathologist who lost her job for refusing to sign a pledge not to boycott Israel to keep her job with Texas. She's allowed to boycott any other nation or even an American state, just not this favored foreign nation. Thus far, the two federal courts to rule on such laws have struck them down as unconstitutional violations of the free speech rights of American citizens on behalf of Israel. How can anyone possibly pretend that it's invalid or offensive to observe, as Congressman Omar did, that some in America demand allegiance to a foreign nation when American citizens are allowed to boycott American states, but are punished for boycotting this one specific foreign nation? So if we see a tweet here by Andrew Cuomo who says, if you boycott Israel, New York State will boycott you. Read my Washington Post op-ed. First, I just want to kind of highlight how strange this all is. Why is our government so sensitive when it comes to Israel? And again, I do want to, the whole reason why I'm doing this podcast today is because I really want to have this conversation. I really don't think it's not anti-Semitic. It's entirely not anti-Semitic to criticize and even ask questions about the support for Israel in this country. And I think anyone who's politically knowledgeable knows that if you do criticize Israel as a public figure, it is career suicide. It is career suicide. And we should all ask ourselves, why? Why is that the case? Why is it career suicide to criticize Israel? What does Israel have on us that is making them such an untouchable force? And me, a young guy, and not entirely in the political world yet, it's already rubbing me the wrong way that's the case. I couldn't do that for any organization, rather, because then that would be inauthentic, and almost makes you bought and paid for, for any lobby, um, to control people like that. So I think it's super important to have this conversation. Um, and I actually spent, last night I was on Instagram and I saw some, pretty offensive and borderline racist political cartoons, on my trending list. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in my career is to kind of bridge a gap, see the humanity in everybody, even if someone has a disagreement with me that is so far out there, like there's no way we'd ever come to common ground. I want to at least try to show that person that there's humanity, even with people that you entirely disagree with, and try to make them know, like, listen, I don't, so the next time they have an argument with someone, and they disagree vehemently with them, that they remember the conversation they had with me. And it's like, oh yeah, there are good people out there who I disagree with, and I don't have to lash out at them. And I feel like, that sends a domino effect and helps the political discourse. So if you are watching this and you strongly disagree with me that, and you strongly think what Omar, Representative Ilhan Omar was anti-Semitic, I just want you to know that this is my opinion, that it was not anti-Semitic to do that. I think we could agree that there should be no organization or lobby that is off the table when it comes to discussing, their political influence. So then there's the fact that so many prominent American Jews have themselves explicitly and proudly acknowledged that their political activism in the U.S. is shaped by a devotion to Israel. Indeed, the leading billionaire funder of both Democratic Party and the Clintons is Haim Saban, who has previously described himself this way to the New York Times as, "I'm a one-issue guy, and my issue is Israel." Hillary Clinton's key political consultant for her 2008 presidential run, Hank Scheinkamp, who is Jewish, said this to the New York Sun in 2007 when asked why Democratic presidential candidates who were otherwise anti-war were so hawkish when it came to Iran. New York is the ATM for American politicians. Large amounts of money come from the Jewish community. If you're running for president and you want dollars from that group, you need to show that you're interested in the issue that matters most to them. That was said, of course, uh, in the New York Times. Actually, the New York Sun, sorry, in 2007, by Hank Scheinkamp. That AIPAC, along with the NRA, Wall Street, and Silicon Valley, is one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington and works to ensure that members of Congress act favorably towards Israel, is so obviously true that no person in good faith could dispute it. A film about the Israel lobby, produced by Al Jazeera, but subsequently self-censored, was leaked to Electronic Intifada, and contains multiple scenes of AIPAC and other pro-Israel activists boasting of how they use money and lobbying power to force Congress to serve Israeli interests. I'm going to say that again. Al Jazeera released a film that showed how AIPAC and other pro-Israel activists were boasting of how they used money and lobbying power to force Congress to serve Israeli interests. I think that line right there is enough to vindicate anyone who is bringing up this issue, and to prove and to nip it in the butt once and for all that it is not anti-Semitic to bring up these issues. Okay. To continue. None of this is remotely controversial to anyone who knows how Washington works, which includes, first and foremost, all of the cowards in the House about to formally denounce Omar yet again for the crime of telling this truth. Indeed, countless prominent Jewish writers, including supporters of Israel, have long said exactly what Omar is accused of having said, that the key goal of the Israel lobby is to cajole, and force U.S. politicians to maintain loyalty to this foreign country. Longtime Israel supporter and New York Times columnist Tom Friedman wrote in 2011 something far more extreme than anything Congresswoman Omar has ever said. A standing ovation for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the U.S. Congress, Friedman wrote, was bought and paid for by the Israel lobby. Friedman mocked Mitt Romney's views on Israel by writing, America's role is to just applaud whatever Israel does, serve as its ATM, and shut up. We have no interests of our own. That goes far more deeper than what Congressman Omar said. And my bird agrees with me right now, as you can hear him. Indeed, the New York Times itself, in news reports, has often described members of Congress as acting with what the paper of records calls alliance to Israel. Let's repeat what the New York Times said in its news article from 2015. Allegiance to Israel has long had nearly unanimous support in Congress. That's what happens when you try to read something hungover, folks. Just a little bit. And let's repeat what the top funder of the Democratic Party in Clinton's billionaire Haim Saban said. I'm a one-issue guy, and my issue is Israel. Now, why have House Democrats never denounced any of those prominent people, including key funders of their own party in the New York Times, for saying things on this topic far more extreme than Omar has? One can't help suspect that it is somehow easier and more tempting to denounce a black Somali immigrant in a hijab who is the first black Muslim woman elected to Congress for her comments on Israel than it is in any of those other people, even though their comments went way beyond anything she said on the topic. Now, I want to stop right there and bring that point up as well. Like Glenn Greenwald just explained, many people have been highly criticized, have criticized the Israel lobby and their influence, and have gone way worse in their descriptions. For example, Mitt Romney and the people that Glenn just explained before. But for some reason, when Omar, Ilhan, who in fact, and I don't like to get into, I really don't. There is a huge racism problem in this country, and it's never gone away. But to immediately use that as the issue when we talk about people of color for any issue, I think is not always the right approach. It's something to think about, but when we just quickly say things are racist because of the color of people's skin, I disagree with that. I think it always has something to do with the topic and the controversy, but to solely blame it on racism is not the way I like to go about things. But when we talk about this and how, like I just said, and what Glenn just wrote, there have been people who have taken this way further, who happen to be white males, and the fact that Ilhan Omar happens to be a Muslim black woman with a hijab, I think strongly has to do with the fact that she is being singled out for all of this. I really do. Now, do I feel like that's the sole reason that this is happening? No, absolutely not. Because now that I think about it, in the political climate that we live in today, if someone else were to say that, like Bernie Sanders, they would definitely, the media and probably the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, criticize him almost to the amount that they are with Omar. But I do think it has a huge component to this backlash, the fact that she is a Muslim woman, and there is this tension with Arabs and Israel. So I think it really is something to think about with all of this. But the most important point regarding the House Democrats' resolution to rebuke Omar is this. The resolution includes a long list of comments which it denounces as anti-Semitic, many, if not most, of which are indeed anti-Semitic, which Ilhan Omar never said or even implied. That's the fraud at the heart of what Democrats are doing. They're purporting to denounce Omar by enacting a resolution that condemns a series of comments about Jews that she never even uttered. Here are the key examples of anti-Semitism which the Democrats' resolution denounces. they in their resolution it says, whereas the definition includes a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed or as hatred towards Jews, including blaming Jews when things go wrong, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of the radical ideology or extremist view or religion, or making mendacious, dehumanizing, stereotypical allegations about Jews. So if that's their definition of anti-Semitism, where does Ilhan Omar fall into this? Because she did nothing of the sort. I'm going to continue. Whereas the definition further includes accusing Jews or Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. So I'm going to read that again. Whereas the definition further includes accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. Okay, I don't recall Representative Omar singling out any Jewish individuals. And in fact, she didn't. She criticized the politicians in general who pledge unconditional allegiance to the Israel lobby, which is a large brush of people. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, to be one of them is in fact Jewish, but I don't think she's singling out Jews in particular. This is just ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. Congresswoman Omar never said anything like this. Unlike Haim Saban, Tom Friedman, and various AIPAC lobbyists, she never accused Jews of having allegiance to Israel. Exactly what I just said. Okay, thanks. Me and Glenn get each other. She never remotely insinuated that Jews are not or cannot be patriotic Americans. She never blamed Jews for anything, let alone justified the killings or harmings of Jews in the name of radical ideology. Indeed, it's grotesque to associate Omar with these comments of any sort. In fact, the irony here is glaring. What is actually bigoted, the real bigots, are those who are exploiting Omar's status as a black Muslim and Somali immigrant to link her to a series of anti-Semitic sentiments that she has never expressed and that have nothing whatsoever to do with the critiques she's voiced about U.S.-Israel policy since entering Congress. All of this is being accomplished by a deceitful slate of hand that conflates the Israeli government and its American supporters, the group that Omar has actually criticized, with Jews, a group that Omar has never criticized. Again, the irony here is glaring. What's actually anti-Semitic is to conflate the Israel government and those who support it with Jews. That's something being done by Democratic House leaders, not Congresswoman Omar. Supporters of Israel is not synonymous with Jews. It's actually offensive to suggest the case, but that's the premise of the Democrats' House solution, those denouncing Congresswoman Omar and those distorting her comments. And indeed, huge numbers of Israel's most vehement and devoted critics, including advocates of the movement to boycott Israel, are themselves Jews. That's why so many prominent Jews have spoken out in support of Congresswoman Omar. Meanwhile, Israel supporters in the US and around the world are far more non-Jews than Jews. Many are evangelicals who support Israel due to religious dogma because they believe God wants Israel united in the hands of Jews before Jesus returns to earth and sends us all non-Christians, including Jews, to hell and allows Christians to reign supreme on earth. Some are just militarists who value Israel's cooperation with US imperialism. Who do you think was responsible for the law in Texas barring anyone from working for the state if they support or boycott Israel? And then there's the international far-right movements from Eastern Europe to Brazil who are almost entirely non-Jewish, yet are fanatical Israel supporters due to shared animus for Muslims and admiration for Israel's authoritarian and militaristic mindset. Extremist support for Israel is a major prong for the far-right Bolsonaro movement in Brazil because of evangelical fanatics, authoritarians, and anti-Muslim militarists who compose that coalition. A huge part of support for the Israel government has nothing to do with Jews, but rather ideology, militarism, and evangelical dogma. So it is completely dishonest, in fact, defamatory and offensive to suggest that Congresswoman Omar was speaking of Jews when she denounced those who are supporters of Israel and who demand that she and other U.S. lawmakers prioritize this foreign nation above the interests of their own constituents. Many, if not most, of those who are doing that are not Jewish at all. That's what makes the Democrats' proposed resolution rebuking her so deceitful without naming her, therefore depriving her of the opportunity to defend herself. It implicitly attributes to her series of highly incendiary comments about Jews that she never remotely made. In fact, if one were to apply the warped reasoning of the House Democrats' resolution to its logical conclusions, then one would have to condemn Congressman Omar for also being anti-Muslim. That's because she has repeatedly voiced very similar criticisms of U.S. support for Saudi Arabia, specifically complaining that Saudi money was corrupting Washington and caused policymakers to be beholden to the Saudi monarchy. Comments which, strikingly, nobody purported to find offensive. This is very true. She has criticized Saudi Arabia before as well. And one thing I want to say before I finish up here on Ilhan Omar in this article here was the fact that a GOP, I'm not sure exactly of the GOP's connection with this political cartoon, but the GOP had some association with a cartoon that compared Omar to a 9/11 terrorist, which I am so disgusted with the fact that the Democrats took action to do something about Omar's comments than to do something about the actual racism coming from the GOP. So it's mind-boggling that we have come to a time where the Democrats are willing to defend or say nothing about situation of racism, but you use a resolution to condemn their own for anti-Semitism that just didn't happen. It's just crazy. It's so crazy. And if why weren't these anti-Saudi comments offensive, including the ones pointing out that Saudi money influences Washington? Because everyone understands that Omar's criticisms of the government of Saudi Arabia and her observation that Saudi money influences pro-Saudi policies does not in any way reflect racism towards Muslims or any sort of an animus. And everyone is capable of understanding that the distinction between the Saudi governments and its supporters and Muslims, it should not be any more difficult to understand the distinction between the Israeli governments and its supporters, which Omar criticized, and Jews who she did not criticize, even implicitly. It's a hard word to pronounce, implicitly. But that recognition as unassailably, wow, Glenn Greenwald uses like SAT words that I've never said in my life, but all power to him. It assumes that the denunciation of Congresswoman Omar is grounded in good faith. It's grounded in everything but that. We all owe a huge debt of gratitude to Democratic Congressman Juan Vargas of California, who denouncing Congresswoman Omar made it bluntly clear that her real offense was, namely, the crime of questioning the policy of U.S. support for Israel. As we all saw that tweet this week from Juan Vargas, he tweeted, "It is disturbing that Representative Omar continues to perpetuate hurtful anti-Semitic stereotypes that misrepresent our Jewish community. Additionally, questioning support for the U.S.-Israel relationship is unacceptable." Pretty much exposing what this all is about. And that is exactly the Washington rule that Congresswoman Omar violated. Questioning support for the U.S.-Israel relationship is unacceptable. And that's exactly the rule that the House Democratic leadership is enforcing, just as AIPAC demanded, by acting so quickly to denounce one of their own members yet again. The time to put a stop to this repressive punishment for even questioning U.S. policy towards Israel has long passed. AIPAC representatives are already threatening to remove Omar, along with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, from Congress for the crime of criticizing Israel, something they've succeeded doing in the past. One response many have embraced in the face of AIPAC's threats and the Democrats' cowardice is to donate money to Omar's campaign fund as a way of denying AIPAC and its supporters the power to punish those who dare to criticize Israel and U.S. support for that foreign country. And whatever else is true, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the House Democrats' leadership are defending Omar by implicitly attributing to her comments that she never made, all with the goal of deterring and punishing anyone who dares to debate these policies. No matter one's view on Israel, such behavior should be treated with the opposition and scorn it deserves. Terrific article, as always, by Glenn Greenwald, really highlighting this just terrible moment. But so I wanted to conclude this whole thing. I thank you for listening to that article, because I think it is the best explanation of what exactly is going on with this whole thing. And I just tweeted that article just now myself. But one final point I want to bring up about this is just how crazy it is that that we really can't criticize Israel in a way that does not get you in trouble like this. And I feel like this is an attack on Omar's, the person she is, as well as it's also sending a message to anyone who wants to criticize the power and of money in Washington and the influence. But one thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that I feel like Representative Ilhan Omar is single-handedly doing so much for the long term of politics. I think she really is. If you think about it, she really is showing people like in our generation, in my generation, how, first of all, how hypocritical the Democratic Party is, how both parties are so beholden to lobbying, because most people, I think I could be wrong, but I think most people in my age group are like, well, wow, this is interesting. This is actually how politics works. They are very beholden to money influence, and this was a complete exposure of that. And I think Representative Omar is just the beginning of a complete transformation in politics, and I think she really is pushing things, even on a metaphysical level, a consciousness awakening amongst the people of America. People are waking up and realizing the influence that money has over politics. And what Representative Omar just did was a huge blow, because even though they're taking so much effort to shut her down and they think they're winning, they're actually losing. Because even though she's getting that shit that she's getting right now, I think in the long run, she is single-handedly changing politics forever. And, her and many other people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, they are all creating a dialogue, a conversation that is completely going to change politics forever. And I do think we are witnessing a very huge moment in American politics, in American history right now, whether it's hard to see it or easy to see it right now. It may not be, but it's truly changing things forever. So that topic went a little bit longer than I had expected, but the last thing I wanted to bring up was Chelsea Manning. And in case you didn't know, Chelsea Manning is a whistleblower who basically was in contact with WikiLeaks during the Bush administration, years ago. And she formerly a man who is a transgender now. She was in a Marines intelligence, not a Marines. She was in an Army intelligence unit who gave information to WikiLeaks when she saw at the time something that was so deeply disturbing to her. She basically saw that U.S. troops in a helicopter were shooting at civilians, kind of bragging about it. I think the video's on YouTube. She gave this private video that was formerly secretive to WikiLeaks, and they exposed it using their website. They exposed what American troops were doing, which was shooting from a helicopter at civilians and killing them. Two of them, of the people that were killed, were they were photographers for Reuters, I believe, or one of the organizations like that. And of course, this goes under the rug because it is a war crime, obviously, and war crimes aren't crimes according to our expectations today and the way we label things. So she exposed this and immediately gets put on trial for being a whistleblower and is sent to 35 years in prison for exposing this horrible crime. And when she goes to prison, she is treated with the worst treatment that anyone in a military prison can be treated, because she was a traitor in the eyes of them, and she was treated awfully. And thankfully for people like Glenn Greenwald again, people that exposed this story, and other whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, she was able to gain consciousness in the public, and enough for her to be given an early exit from prison from the Obama administration. So that's a brief overview of what Chelsea Manning is, who she is, and her legacy. Now, for some strange reason, yesterday, a secret trial is happening against Julian Assange in the U.S., and they asked Chelsea Manning to participate in it and testify, and she declined to do that. So I'm going to pull up that article real fast here, so we can talk about pretty much what exactly that is. And so a judge has held Chelsea Manning in contempt for and she is being detained after refusing to testify about her closure of military and diplomatic secrets to WikiLeaks in 2010, her lawyer says. This is a CNN article, by the way. The former Army intelligence analyst, who served about 7 years in prison for the massive leak, objected to the questioning in grand jury appearance Wednesday in Virginia. Her testimony appears to be part of a continued effort by federal prosecutors investigating the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, imprisoning me for my refusal to answer questions, and only subjects me to additional punishment for my repeatedly stated ethical objections to the grand jury system, Manning said in a statement Friday posted on her Twitter account. Manning's attorney said that she would likely appeal to order by the judge, and that Manning would be held behind bars for the term of the grand jury, but not longer than 18 months. Asked if Manning was prepared to stay in prison for 18 months, they said they were not there yet. As everybody knows, Chelsea has tremendous courage. Our primary concern at this point is her health while she is confined, and we will be paying close attention to that. So basically what this means is that once again, Chelsea Manning is behind bars for doing nothing wrong. I mean, if you want to get technical here, she broke the law for exposing that the secret murders and atrocities of our own U.S. military. But in essence, she did nothing wrong. And once again, now she's being used to for a prosecution against Julian Assange, who again did nothing wrong. There's hypothetical speculation that he worked with a foreign power to get Trump elected this time, but there's absolutely no evidence to prove that. In fact, that was used to prove the whole Russiagate story, which is now falling apart as the Mueller investigation is coming out. So, so what does this all really mean? Well, one of the things that pops out to me firsthand is the fact that we are all so quick to join the media's fight against press freedoms, the danger on press freedoms that Donald Trump apparently is threatening. Because what does Donald Trump do? He says NBC News, CBS, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, they're all fake news. He says they're fake news and that they're the enemy of the people. I like to do the hand movements when I say anything that Trump says. Trump says this, and immediately the media gets on the defensive and says this is a danger to press freedoms because not only are you destroying the public's faith in the press, but it's the war on truth. This is post-truth era. You keep hearing all of this, but I think it is strongly important to consider the fact that all right, so if we're going to use this precedent here that Trump is threatening press freedoms, I think equivocally, we need to look at WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, who release classified information, things that publications are supposed to do, keeping the feet to the fire to organizations and governments. So when Julian Assange, a journalist, exposes and releases documents as a publication, he is then the enemy of the people, according to the government. So my thing is, it is an absolute joke that we say it is a danger on press freedoms when Trump criticizes the fake news media, but the fake news media doesn't even bother to even mention the huge implications on press freedoms that a prosecution of Julian Assange would do. And by Chelsea Manning getting arrested again only proves that we're not really interested in press freedoms. We're interested in getting rid and taking out of people who are a threat to the U.S. government. So basically what I'm trying to say is you can't sit here and say that you support the media and the media's right for press freedoms when also wanting to prosecute Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning. It's just we're at a level of such hypocrisy in our country right now that I'm surprised that people live their lives and kind of know this is going on and just do nothing about. This is a complete attack on press freedoms. The fact that Chelsea Manning is arrested again, it is again sending a message to whistleblowers not to reveal secrecy within our own government, and this is just this is stuff I can just go on and on and on and on about, but I wanted to keep this video short. So I'm going to end this here. I want you to send me any extensions of the conversation that you wanted to add, any thoughts. A lot of important things going on right now, and I thank you guys for tuning in, and we will be live again soon. All right. Thank you.